Hi, this is Phil McCauley for Labour Business TV, and today I'm very delighted to welcome Geoff Thompson, five-time world karate champion, social activist and entrepreneur. Geoff, welcome to our show.
Hi Phil, thanks for having me.
Now, how are you? First of all, how's the family? How have you been getting on through the pandemic?
Remarkably, being in isolation was very much a habit that I had to employ when competing at world-class world championship, winning medal formulas of just establishing a disciplined period of time where you had to forego all the social niceties and social gatherings in order to focus to the job in hand, which was about preparation for winning. So it meant in those winter months, ironically the first quarter of the year, you literally trained, ate, slept, and followed that ritual of really investing a lot of hard work in the hope that once you surfaced in the spring, you'd start to see some of the benefits of that hard work, and you'd built a platform upon which to enter into the all-important speed and skill sets that would give you the opportunity to compete and win. So this lockdown has been revealing, insightful. It's given a lot of time. We relocated from Manchester to Ashford in Kent. So there were a lot of changes we had to really adapt to very quickly. So I think our sporting discipline, habit, rituals of routine, the garage became the training environment, and a house became a home. We have 3 young adults, 1 in New York. So there was a slight worry, but the wonders of technology meant we could speak each day, and we've been very much a tribe in how we depend on each other. So with Luke's brother and sister Jordan, obviously elder, equally having to be furloughed in his boxing career. So our daughter, obviously dancing with Lion King and Disney, equally furloughed, all having to adapt in their own respective situations, but equally using the digital age to commit, connect, and I think communicate, but ultimately just stay resilient. And that whole mental, physical, and emotional skill set, again, was something we were able to draw upon, again, born out of the sporting discipline and the benefits you get from following a martial arts discipline.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure you're all being very calm together in lockdown, and there's no fighting.
It's always a very peaceful household, as you know, with Janice being a world champion. Whenever it gets to a point of, let's just say, accommodating one another's company, we go into the garage, it's all resolved. The rule is, once you come out of the garage, you go into the home, you leave it all behind.
Perfect. Now, you've had this incredible, stellar career in karate. How did you first get into it? What was your route into the sport? And also, if you can connect that to why that's so important for the work you do now on the streets in terms of helping people get their way forward in their own lives.
How I came into it is how, as you've stated, now I feel it is still applicable. Whereas being a young teenager, having lost my father at a young age, moving from Wolverhampton to the East End of London, it was very much a case of the proverbial 2 chips on the shoulder. One was my accent, one was the colour of my skin. I wasn't going to get rid of the colour of my skin easily, so the accent changed very quickly, because you have to adapt, I believe, to your environment and your social and cultural setting. School was not something I was readily willing to engage with. I was still very much disaffected by the loss of my father. So you were consistently looking for role models. And I always say I was brought up by a community. And the wonderful character of the East End is, whilst there were racial divides, there were socially uniting and binding relationships. Being in an all-boys school, Brookhouse Secondary, you had house rivalry, you had postcode rivalry, you had all the rivals you could think of, but it meant there was a lot of aggression. And there was violence then. I had the National Front to consider then. There was postcode rivalry, school rivalry. So it was the need to learn to defend myself and protect myself that I went to the Michael Sobel Sports Centre. I stumbled past the door and it changed my life. I saw the then Tatsuo Suzuki, the late Tatsuo Suzuki, who was slight in build, disposing of these 2 guys about 6 foot, and I was captivated. And it became a curriculum for life. You know, they say a good book finds you. Well, if there was anything that ever found me at the right time in my life, it was karate. And I progressed, achieving firstly my goal of achieving a black belt, and then I discovered competition. And I'd likened it to grievous bodily harm with discipline and with rules. And I didn't know Japanese. First competition was do unto others before they do it unto you. I got a silver medal, decided I don't much like that. the rest, they say, is history. But I think as I achieved those gold medals, traveled the world, which broadens the mind, I always went to areas of deprivation. And it's amazed me, whether it be townships, favelas, disadvantaged communities, projects, they all have similar conditions of existence and survival. So karate is transcendent. It's a universal language, has many dialects and styles. And that was to see me go from the medals that would influence, because once you win medals for Britain, and I uniquely led a Great Britain team, again, it provides a unique club of individuals, and there's no greater patriotic honour of leading a British team and winning in British colours.
What does that actually feel like? What does it feel like when you've done that for Britain?
It is the ultimate high. I always say to people, unless you see it, feel it, and for those who watch major sporting events, or there are major games or World Cups or World Games, I had the great opportunity to win a Games medals on British soil at Crystal Palace, and Jan won on the Saturday, and I had to follow that on the Sunday. No pressure, but what I'm saying is, anyone who really understands and appreciates what it is to represent your country, to then win, stand on a rostrum, hear the national anthem, I still say holds as memory. I call it memory currency, and it is the ultimate high. Nothing ever comes close to it, and that sets you on a course of what you achieve. As I've gone from street to stadium to rostrums, back to the streets, into seeing how that can help others. And I am a product of Sport for All. And I think moving that and accelerating it to the work that myself and Janice have represented over the last 27 years in the Youth Charter, it was simply that, to provide an opportunity for young people to have what we had, an opportunity to walk through a door, meet someone that would inspire us and equip us with life skills, channel that aggression and that energy, focus it into a disciplined lifestyle benefit. And as I firmly believe, it can give you so much confidence, trust and respect in yourself and others. It can do a lot to alleviate a lot of the tensions that we're finding on our streets at the moment.
And talking practically about that, and your achievements with Youth Charter are exceptional. What is it you think that's going on with knife crime in this country? What on earth can we do? Where can we start to begin to address this properly?
Firstly, I think we need to look at weapons crime. In 2007, Channel 4 commissioned a weapons commission, and Sherry Blair, QC, headed that commission. I gave evidence at the time. And I think it was a case of looking at why young people aren't equipped with the mental, physical, and emotional resilience and tools to be able to compete in life. Their disaffection, disadvantage, and disillusionment influenced by a fast-moving society where their thumbs are more interactive than their actual physical engagement and development, start to see them look more violently rather than aggressively. And by that I mean aggression can be channeled, it can be focused, it can be disciplined. If you don't have that, and I believe it's a fundamental human right that you have that outlet for aggression, especially for young males, especially in those teenage years where that testosterone is coursing through the veins. If you don't have that as a preventative and interventive form of activity, you will get that energy misdirected. And as the gang culture has become populist culture, if anyone really wants to understand what I'm talking about, in the 80s, there was a film, Boys in the Hood. It was a seminal moment, not only for youth culture, gang culture, but black culture. And I remember coming out of that cinema with a tear thinking, here am I at the top of my sporting prowess in world championship winning success, but the communities I've come from, we had riots then, and we have that disaffection now expressed to a very small minority. And I always say to people, there is a way of redirecting that energy, but you have to provide hope and opportunity. And what does that mean? A good education, a good mental, physical, and emotional outlook to life, a good further or higher education. As we say in Youth Charter, you engage them with sport, culture, arts, and digital. You equip them with the mental, physical, and emotional, health, well-being, and resilience. And then they are confident to be aspirational in their empowerment. And that is to further higher education, employability, or entrepreneurship. That is a social, cultural, and economic ecosystem that says we can use that energy and that minority embedded into society, productive, positive, and progressive. And I believe at this moment in time, And it transcends political ideology or political colour. We have seen a consistent failed set of policies and hundreds of millions of resources pumped into historical areas of deprivation. And equally, it's not a black thing or a white thing, it's a youth thing. You know, youth culture, if you go to Croxteth or Salford, there are very few faces that look like me. It's a social, cultural, and economic issue. And I believe it should start with a youth ministry, a youth commission, and a youth action plan. But back to the point, it really is about channeling that energy and giving it some focus, giving it some habit, giving it some behavioral characteristics. Whereas before they either went to prison or they went in the army. I think we need to create a new 21st century offer.
Extraordinary. That's a great vision. Now, where does that sit in relation to what we're all experiencing presently globally, with the whole tragedy of the recent events in the United States, the Black Lives Matter movement, the way millions of people have taken to the street to protest peacefully, demanding change? What's your sense of that right now, and where do we go from here?
I have to respond personally as a black man, because throughout my life I faced challenges. In my eternal optimism on the basis of everything that works or doesn't work is based upon what you look like, where you come from, what you believe in, what you sound like, and what your lifestyle choices. And I've had to reflect very deeply based on my son in New York, who we were slightly worried about. He's got a good alumni where the students had all got online and they wanted to go and march. And I've always believed that marching is a very powerful form of democracy. Rioting is a very extreme form of democracy. But the campaigning and advocacy has to be representative of the journey we've had. And they say where America is tomorrow, we follow here in Britain and possibly in Europe, because America is the culturally, globally influential nation that represents so many of those migrating, diverse cultures that have made those United States. However, I grew up influenced by the civil rights movement. I remember watching the funeral of Martin Luther King and my mother shedding a tear singing "We Shall Overcome." I watched and was influenced by the Black Panther movement. Angela Davis was my poster girl. I was brought up to be aware, to challenge. Watching the Soweto uprising in 1976, where the youth of South Africa took on then the third most powerful army in the world, because they didn't want to learn an oppressive language of Bantu. They wanted their own culture. And I think what we've seen progressively and all too worryingly, and most of our work in the Youth Charter has been in the States. We have a relationship with the Muhammad Ali Center, the great sporting humanitarian and activist of the time, who equally inspired me. But I think we really need to take a long, hard look at what the freedom of slavery meant and looked like, what Jim Crow meant, what it actually did to just re-enslave those that were supposed to be free. And whilst we've seen a political class, a professional class, almost many would say a socioeconomic class develop, the society of have and have nots has become more polarized, with those life chances limited. The police, I've always, even here, to be stopped was one thing, to be searched was another. To end up in a cell is not what you did over here. In the States, they seem to be more extreme on taking you out on the streets. And I think we have to have the honest discussion. It has always gone on. I've been aware of it for so many years. But I think the age of the mobile phone, the instant nature upon which you can record a moment and share a moment with the whole world, bearing in mind that the world had paused, COVID-19 had seen us for the first time paying attention to things we wouldn't normally. And I think watching 8 minutes 46, I have not watched it. I'm going to admit that now. I've seen images and that would be enough to me. Because if anybody who's human, genuinely human, and we all are, would not want to be treated in the way that that man was treated. And that boot on the neck of George Floyd stir a conscience in those of us who not only were of color, but to any fair-minded global citizen. And I think the responses have been historic. I remember the Stephen Lawrence soul searching in this country, for example, and not much happened. And the Macpherson report, only I think last year, said all the recommendations had not seen any real or lasting change or impact. I'd sense something in the air. This time it feels different. It looks different. I think people have taken the time to now say, whilst this is wrong, and whether we looked at apartheid, the civil rights movement, the end of so many injustices globally, I think George Floyd's life is simply reflected so many hundreds of lives that have been lost. But equally on this green and pleasant land, lives have been lost. So many lives have been lost in police custody. We now, I think, need to have the moratorium. I think we've reached a global crossroads. I don't agree with statues being removed, or else we're going to have to remove a large number of buildings on the proceeds of the slave trade, because it is about an intergenerational and continued lack of opportunity that I make an economic argument. That is, it cannot be beyond the economies of scale that you properly integrate a small minority of people, socially and culturally and economic, to the benefit of themselves and the benefit of the economy and society as a whole. So Black Lives Matter, I believe, has to be rightfully so looking at making us count in a really pragmatic and realistic way. In America, legislations are changing that would have taken years, state by state. A global movement, we're seeing changes here. I never thought I'd hear Lloyd's announce that they would look at reparations, and it's something I've been looking at, invested in education though. And that's education for everybody, not just opportunity for Black lives, but education to all lives who need to understand where we've come from. So education in schools. What is the real history? Let's tell the real history. Let's have people respect for where we've come from, and then celebrate the progress we've made, because we as a species are work in progress.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think that's deeply moving and touching. Thank you for sharing that. Regarding the government, they've just announced an inquiry, a commission to look again in response to recent events. What would your advice be, and what would your evidence be to that inquiry?
Firstly, I do not believe an inquiry or a commission will do anything to move the mood of change and impact that is now being sought. As I said earlier, the Stephen Lawrence report, the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, I was part of it. I contributed to a lot of police consultation, brokering discussions, difficult discussions with the community and young people in particular. And the language, the mood was still combative and confrontational. Nonetheless, the recommendations were made. Nothing has happened, no progress has been made. We need to see a national alliance and task force. We need to see an action plan. We need to see it with a roadmap. We need to see it representative to all the some parts of what the challenges are and what the opportunities are. Because I don't want a societal backlash, as I remember then in the Stephen Lawrence report and recommendations. I remember having a very forthright meeting with some of the pillars of the establishment. It said, right, we've done enough. This is far too uncomfortable for us. We think the line should be drawn. And I said, what does the line look like? And I think the line has again been drawn. I do not think it's a progressive step by the current government to simply fob us off. And that's the honest view. You can't fob us off with an inquiry and a simple view that whatever it produces, because it will just go into the long grass. We've got a movement of activism that's now. I believe if you develop a national task force, a coalition, you bring the best minds available to you with diverse look, feel, commitment, knowledge, and purpose. You set it with the terms of reference. We already have the racial disparity unit and audit. There is everything we would need to refer to and be brought back to at regular intervals so that everybody can see whatever they've sacrificed. Because let's have the honest discussion. I never believed after 3 months of lockdown and social distancing that an event in Minneapolis on the streets of injustice and a life taken, violently as it was, that we would see the world socially in unified solidarity, risk everything by way of global public health on the injustice of the time. And that's why I have faith and belief in the human race and in humankind. To see those sights frightened me and inspired me. I said, so there is something more than self when we all truly address the challenges of the day. But back to this issue, we cannot have an inquiry and just a commission. It's got to be a lot sharper in its focus, its commitment, its intention, and what it wants to see at the end of it.
Amazing. That sounds exactly right. Now, thinking specifically about the government and symbolism, we've heard a lot recently about taking the knee And where are you on that? Because I think it's very much misunderstood if we look at the complete ignorance of some of the government ministers talking about this. What's your sense of that?
My sense of that is very simple. Martin Luther King is the symbol of taking the knee, and it followed his philosophy of non-violent protest. It showed that whilst we will kneel on one knee, we will not bow in subservience to the continued injustices being suffered. And as a result of that, as he was to prove, he created a vision of what the new America could look like. Colin Kaepernick used sport. And I've always said, whether it was Tommy Smith and John Carlos, again, the iconic image globally that resulted from what would have been the greatest moment in their lives, achieving Olympic gold and silver, but to be not valued and appreciated and welcomed in your own country. And I met John Carlos, and it was a very spiritual moment, if the truth be told, because I remember that, Muhammad Ali, Arthur Ashe, another great sporting humanitarian, who believed that sport was something more than just the winning. It was about the taking part, because we come from that taking part community. And I think at the moment, Colin Kaepernick in 2016 was to suffer greatly for taking that knee, for the injustices of that time. 4 years on, that sacrifice has been symbolized with everybody, by choice, taking that knee. It became something that said, we will bow, but we will not be subservient to those who choose to exploit us. I've watched those who say it's not for them to do. Dominic Raab, and I will call him out, because for one simple reason, I know he'll take one knee to the Queen and to his wife, but he does take two knees in a dojo, because he's done karate, he is a black belt, so I can speak to him as a fellow martial artist and karateka. When he took both knees as the ritual of beginning a karate session and bowed before his instructor, was that now and not respecting the expertise and the leadership of what knowledge would be shared? So I was very surprised, and I would challenge Dominic Raab to a wonderful karate session where this master will impart to him the wisdom and knowledge that suggests it would have been a very politically noble step on the basis of being a karate student and knowing in a dojo where belts are the color of distinction, that when you bow, you are bowing to yourself, you are bowing to your instructor, and then you are bowing to those around you, so that you will learn and develop in a disciplined and well-managed environment. And I think Dominic Raab could have done so, and I think presented a very powerful, decisive leadership of political compassion, if nothing else.
Yes, it is an extraordinary position for him to be so blind to the issue, in my view. But thinking about this going forward now, Geoff, we've covered a lot of ground. And finally, I want to really talk about the Olympics and what you're up to. Share with everybody what you're doing, because this is absolutely remarkable. Tell us what's happening now and what your aim is.
Well, I talked about all those that had inspired me through the respective Olympic Games and major sporting events as to the social impact and value of highlighting injustices of the time. And you know, we should also remember the Munich Olympics, where the Israeli athletes became the victims of people who wanted to use the purity of Olympism to bring the world to their intentions of using very violent and extreme means to seek justice of what they felt was important at the time. So there's always been Mary Peters winning Olympic gold in Munich, and actually bringing the north and south of Ireland together. I know what the power of sport can do. The Youth Charter has been the reflection of that belief and philosophy. But even as we spoke, and 6 prime ministers on, we were still struggling to have respective governments really understand the investment, not donation and grant, the investment that needs to be made to young people. In a moment of exasperation, and I think it was the 2019 spate of lives being lost, where it was cited as a national disaster, a pandemic, all these very, very strong words of what was an unacceptable loss of life, saw me start to train anyway, but then start to feel that I needed it for my own mental, physical, and emotional health or well-being, to be honest with you. And then Janice saying to me, you're beginning to display traits that I thought had been long gone. And Fight for the Streets, as it was to become, resulted from me returning to the square after 33 years for a charity event to win £10,000 for the Youth Charter and to put that money back onto the streets and to kickstart our call to action, which during the Brexit election saw a youth manifesto, £11 million, 10,000 social coaches, 10 cities, carefully worked out, and national consultation, and nothing. So I decided to channel my aggression and frustrations back into training. I was going to compete again in April with 10K Clash. That got cancelled because of COVID-19, rescheduled in October. Jan said, if you're going to commit for that, the games were cancelled, rescheduled for next year. I'd already been training with some of the elite performers at the National Taekwondo Centre, managed to get myself a ban because I was too aggressive. Well, there's a thing for you. And over the last number of months, I've been put through my paces, and Janice is still the best coach I've ever had. And Geoff Thompson's in a very good position. So World Karate are shocked. Everyone else seems to be shocked. But I think for me, as the potential bad boy made good with the disaffection, disadvantage, and disillusionment that I had, but through karate changed my life and the life of so many around me, I think it's always good to have a dream. I walked away from karate at the age of 27, never peaked in my sport, to pursue Olympic gold for 88 in Seoul, picked up an injury because I was doing the 400-meter hurdles. This for me is the ultimate challenge. Everybody says it cannot be done, and I will always disprove those who say it can't be done, because God has a sense of humor.
Geoff Thompson, thank you very much for joining me today, and good luck at the Olympics. And I very much look forward to your match with Dominic Raab. Cheers for now.
Thanks, Phil.